right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 1:05 p.m. We have our first of 6 sessions that we will be discussing these next 2 weeks in our 901 personal finance sessions. As you probably know, April is Financial Literacy Month. And what the Memphis Public Library has done this month is to offer several materials to you, virtual and otherwise, during Financial Literacy Month. Many of these topics for the next 2 weeks are part of my 90-day curriculum to financial literacy that was implemented in November of 2018. Many of these sessions before the pandemic were offered at essentially every library in the Memphis Public Library system. And what we've done for this month and what we plan on doing hopefully in October is to have several topics that deal with financial literacy. I'm your host this afternoon. I'm Ed Ford Jr. I am the Senior Financial Literacy Coordinator for the Memphis Public Library System. So just a little snapshot about me. I do have certification and membership with the Credit Consultants Association. I'm a credit repair specialist, also bonded with the state of Tennessee. I used to teach mathematics at Shelby County Schools and the Metro Nashville Public School System, and I'm in another capacity as well. But we're going to go right into the topic at hand. So I know several of you that are on here right now, whether you're on the phone or whether you are in the chat room. You're here because you either want to get more information or you want to be able to share that information with others. So I'm going to start you off with a rhetorical question. Do you want to build your credit so that you can buy that new car or get that new house or qualify for that nice credit card? If the answer is yes, you're in the right spot. So without reading everything that's at the bottom, the Consumer Federation of America and Vantage Score Solutions LLC did some studies. And those studies came back saying that the younger a person is, most likely that person does not know the full effect of their credit and their credit score as far as being credible, whether it's getting their first apartment or whether it's getting their lights turned on or getting their first phone or something like that. But it also showed that the older somebody was, the more knowledgeable they were about the impact on their credit. So why are these things important? I'm going to read you the Tyler Gregory quote first, and then I'm going to give you the Ed Ford quote. The Tyler Gregory quote says, if you don't take good care of your credit, then your credit won't take good care of you. The Ed Ford quote is, it is very expensive to have bad credit. I'm going to say that one more time. It is very expensive to have bad credit. I mean, think about it. If you are trying to get your lights turned on, just like this graphic right here, which could represent Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. When you call in and you're getting those lights turned on for the first time, or you've moved to another location and you're trying to get your lights transferred over, they'll look at your credit. And depending on how your credit looks, you may be able to get your lights turned on quickly, or you still might be able to get them turned on, but you might have to drop something off, such as a deposit. I've seen some people have to give a $200 to $500 deposit to the utility company for the purposes of getting the lights turned on. And they have to wait 12 months in order to get that back as a credit. But there's a catch. They have to make on-time payments for those 12 months in a row in order to get that money back as a credit. They want to see if you're going to be credible or not. And if you look at the percent sign here, this represents low interest rate. So essentially, the higher your credit score, the lower the interest you will have to pay. But the lower your credit score, the more interest you will have to pay. So what we're going to be talking about in this slide is what is credit, what we're trying to establish. We're going to talk about some of the myths that people still believe today that are not true concerning credit. We're going to talk about what credit is and what credit is not. And we're going to talk about the benefits of having good credit. So let me start off with what is credit. And I'm not going to give you this dictionary laden definition. I'm going to give you a lay term definition for credit. Credit is essentially the ability to pay bills over a period of time. That's all it is. The ability to pay your bills over a period of time. And when you do those things, those actions will be on your credit reports, whether it's Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. And depending on what you do in particular categories, which we'll talk about later, they will compute something called a credit score. Now, when we get to the 6 myths, I'm going to talk about them a little bit more in detail, but I want to let you know what the benefits of having good credit are in the next slide. So who checks your credit? Well, if you are on that car lot and you are trying to get one of those vehicles off the lot, you're most likely going to get your credit pulled. Now, I'm going to give you a rule of thumb, some things that people don't necessarily know. If you don't necessarily have a pre-qualification letter before you go into the car dealership, or if you don't already have that financing, many times what that dealership is going to do is your credit is going to get pulled all over the place. I've seen people get as many as 25 hard pulls on their credit over trying to get a vehicle. And half of the time they don't even get the vehicle. But people don't realize every time you get your credit pulled from that credit reporting agency, you're going to lose about 3 to 10 points per pull. I've seen 3 and I've seen 10. So if you talk about 25 pulls, but those 25 pulls are probably over 3 credit reporting agencies. So you might have about 7 or 8 pulls per credit reporting agency. That's not good, because when you try to get credit, whether it's a credit card or a loan, they're going to see that and they're going to see, oh, you got your credit pulled very recently 7 or 8 times. You got too many inquiries, denied. And you don't want that. When you buy your house, or if you're interested in buying a house, they're going to look at your FICO scores. They're going to look at your middle score, and they're going to determine whether you may qualify for down payment assistance, or if you just qualify for the conventional loan or the FHA loan. You never want to fly blind when you are looking at trying to get a loan or a car or a credit card. Nobody on here now should say, well, I applied for this. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, what was your credit score? Oh, I don't know. That's not good. You always want to go in. You wouldn't go behind a wheel with a blindfold on and go down I-40 or I-55 or Elvis Presley Boulevard or Union Avenue. You wouldn't do that. So don't do that with your credit. I've already mentioned MLGW here. When you get that cell phone, both of these entities could ask you for some money up front because your credit score may not be up to par. Let's talk about these two things, the job and the insurance. You got jobs now that look at your credit to see if you are reliable. They don't get to look at all of your credit report, but they are allowed to look at particular pieces of your credit report for the purposes of seeing if you're reliable or not. And then let's talk about insurance. Now, insurance companies now look at census tracts to determine what type of rate you're going to get on insurance. Now, I will give you 2 local examples. Think about the Whitehaven area. The Whitehaven area has 2 zip codes, 38109 and 38116. If you go behind Whitehaven High School and keep driving down that street, you'll get to a church. You'll also get to some railroad tracks. Follow me here. On one side of the railroad tracks, you have 38109. On another side of the railroad tracks, you have 38116. They both have 2 different census tracts. Because of the census tract of 38109 and what it has as far as schools, crime, things of that nature, the things that insurance companies look at, 38109 will be paying more in insurance than 38116 because of the census tract. and they also look at the credit. But let me also talk about another area. Let's talk about the French Fort neighborhood. French Fort neighborhood is a very stable neighborhood right below downtown, and their zip code is 38106. Downtown is 38103. Now, French Fort and downtown both share the same river, the same cobblestones, but they have two different zip codes. Who do you think pays more? 38106, because of the census tract. In fact, that conversation got so deep concerning interest rates and insurance rates going up, you actually had those folks in the French Fort area lobby to the federal government to get their zip code changed because many of those people had fixed incomes, and because of the census tract that they lived in, their rates were higher than their neighbors up north. Many of you probably didn't know that. So let's go to the next slide. All right. And whoever just joined, welcome. All right. So let's talk about these 6 myths regarding credit. First of all, checking your credit will drop your credit score. That's false. I check my credit every Monday at 8 a.m. If that was the case, my credit score would be in the negative. Again, it goes back to what I said before. Why do you want to fly blind when you are looking at buying that home or buying that car or trying to qualify for that first credit card or second credit card? You always want to know what your score is before you do that. And let me give a disclaimer. There will be some apps that I will be introducing to you. I am not affiliated with any of those apps, but I use these apps because these apps are free, but they just think about it. If you have something that's free, you're not getting everything that you need. So I'll talk about that later when we get there. Numbers 2 and 3 go together. It does not matter how much money you got in the bank, and it doesn't matter how much money you make. I know people that make $10 an hour with a 700 credit score. And on the other side, I know people who make 6 figures who have a 400 credit score. It's all about your habits. It's all about, are you going to follow the rules to the game, which I'm going to talk about in future slides. I talk about how ESPN did a documentary on 30 for 30 where the title was Broke. The title was called Broke. And it talked about how all these athletes made millions and millions of dollars and their credit was messed up. In fact, I think the statistic was, welcome. The statistic was 3 years after an NFL athlete retired, 70% of those athletes ended up filing bankruptcy or going broke. And in the NBA, it was after 5 years, 60% of them. Now think about it. Most of your athletes that you don't necessarily hear about, their average time span in the league is only 3 years. So if they leave college at 22, many of them are back at the house at 25. Let's look at number 4. If I'm a minority, then my credit score will be lower than a minority. It is not legal for these companies to use any category that is protected to determine what your credit score is. Let's look at number 5. I should only check my credit when I'm applying for credit. Let me give you an example that hit home with me. I ended up applying for a line of credit in 2018. This actually happened, so let me give you this true story. What happened was I was getting my line of credit renewed. That lending company, I won't mention the name of the bank or credit union, but they informed me that we need to turn off the system reporting for you because we still have to underwrite your reapproval. I was like, okay, that's fine. So that was in October of 2018. So then I waited 30 days. They finally said, congratulations, we've renewed your line of credit. So I'm like, okay. I ended up paying it off. But they had this balance. They had this balance of like 40% owed. And I was like, I paid that off. They were like, okay, well, you know, Mr. Ford, we went ahead and renewed you. So give it about 30 minutes to show up. Okay, December 2018 comes around. That same old balance was on there. I'm like, okay, we got a problem here. my utilization ratios are being messed up because it's not reporting right. I end up paying it off. I went back to the bank and they were like, Mr. Ford, let's look into it. Okay. I said, okay, I'm ready. I got some things I need to do. So then January comes around, January 2019. Now I'm already 2 months in with this new job, the job that I have with the library. So I'm like, okay, I got the same balance. It's been 90 days. What's going on here? So the gentleman went and researched and said, oh, Mr. Ford, I just found out what happened. Remember when we were trying to underwrite your line of credit? And I said, yes. What they said to me was, we forgot to turn the system back on so that it can report. So I'm like, okay, let's get the system turned back on so that the balance can be zero reporting in February. We can move on. Well, people, the difference between a human being and a computer is the human being knew that I paid on time, I paid it off, and I was a good customer. The computer, the algorithm, only knows that we don't have any information for you the last 90 days. So what do you think the computer did? It put me down as, well, if we don't have any information, you must have been late. So a big 90-day late payment showed up on my report and dropped me 100 points. I went back to that bank. So my 810 went down to 710. Now, I know some of you are like, I wish I had a 710 right now. Well, not if you had an 810 a couple of weeks ago. So what happened was I went back to the bank. I said, we got a problem here. I showed them my 710 credit score. The first thing they told me was, oh, that's a very nice score. I said, no. I had 810 last week. Now you're reporting 90 days late. There's a problem with that. They went back and found out it was their mistake. They had to fix it. But folks, what I'm trying to let you know is, what if I did not check my credit on a regular basis? What if I did not take those steps to make sure I knew what my score was at all times? I can't fly blind like that because look, if I decided I wanted to fly blind, a mistake by that bank cost me 100 points. And I tell folks, when you apply for credit, always know what your credit score is for all three reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And I'm going to give you one statistic that's still true today. 81% of all credit reports have at least one mistake. 81%. So that means, let's say 20 people are in the classroom with us today. That means on average, 16 of you have at least one mistake on your credit report. And we know number 6 is true. So identity theft is a reality. Okay. So let me talk about my story real quick. And then after I talk about my story, we're going to get to the very important pieces of the entire presentation. We should be done with the presentation around 2:30 so that we can entertain questions and answers. So my story, my road from a 500, I'm being nice. I really had a 490 credit score at one time, but now I'm over 800. But let me tell you what happened. So I graduated from Tennessee State in 2000, but something happened to me in 1999. Now, for those that are familiar with Tennessee State, you know there's an area called the Sub that's in the student union where you can get a burger and some fries and you can hang out with your friends and your associates. So all I want to do is go get a burger and some fries. There was a lady that had a little kiosk and she ended up getting my attention. What she asked me to do is to apply for a credit card. Now, I didn't know how to use a credit card. I wasn't given the information on what to do in school, but I ended up applying. And I applied for the credit card. She said, congratulations. And for applying, you get a free t-shirt. Ladies and gentlemen, that t-shirt cost me $3,200. And it was not a Gucci, a Louis, a Prada, a Givenchy, or anything else. It was a regular rag shirt that I think my mom uses now to take the dust off the furniture at the house. But the point I'm trying to make is I did not have the skill set to deal with a credit card at that time. So what happened? The following week, I got a credit card in the mail for $1,000. Now, I'm 19 years old. You already know what I did. I ran that thing up to $997. Then the bill came. And what happened was I looked at the bill. And it said the minimum payment is only $10. So I'm like, oh, okay, I can pay $10. But there's something called interest. There's something called late fees. There's something called not being responsible. So at the beginning, I paid the $10 off. So I'm like, okay, the $9.97 may go down to $9.87. Wrong. That $9.87 dropped, no, $9.97 dropped down to $9.95 and change. You know, I'm glad that credit card companies now tell you if you pay the minimum, but you don't make any charges, it will take you 37 and a half years to get it paid off. They didn't do that before. So what ended up happening is I ended up paying the minimum for a period of time. Then I ended up getting late. Then, of course, the calls came. You know those phone calls where they call you and it's either an 800 number, or 8-something number, or a spoof number. And the first thing you hear is this call will be monitored for quality assurance. We know what that means. So it ended up being a charged off collection, et cetera, et cetera. I moved back to Memphis. I did not know that that debt was not only past the statute of limitations, but when I moved back to Memphis, I got sued in Nashville regarding that college debt. Now, when you get sued, you must go to court, because if you don't, you'll get something called a judgment on you. And what will happen is they will either take it out of your check or your bank account. They did the latter with me. Again, that t-shirt that the lady gave me cost me $3,200. I was not responsible at that particular time with my finances. And I tell folks in the library system when I have these sessions, virtual and otherwise, I don't mind telling my story because I don't want the next person to make the mistakes that I made over 20 years ago. So I ended up not being happy about it. And I said to myself, okay, am I going to pout about it, or am I going to put my big pants on and deal with this situation? So I ended up getting all three of my credit reports and all three of my scores, and I saw 490, 495, 500. It was a mess. And I saw that I had 111 negative items on my report. Now, before y'all say, what were you doing? Many of those were either not mine, obsolete, statute of limitations, and I even had an Ed Ford who went to Southern Illinois, Carbondale, who lived in Indiana, who was on my report. So my report was just out there in the streets. But the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you have to take the ownership so that you can create that better life for yourself. So I ended up getting a credit repair company to look at my stuff at first. But when I ended up finding out a few months after I hired them, they were going slow as snails on purpose so that they can get that money. So I learned the game myself. In fact, I'm gonna make you laugh. I learned the game so well, I got sued 2 more times. But at least I knew what the Fair Credit Reporting Act was. I knew what my rights were under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I knew all of those things. And I think they knew too. And because the statute of limitations on many of those items was coming up, they decided, oh, we got to sue to get this money. But I went to court, had my stuff together, and I won both cases. But at the same time, I was making sure that I was doing what I needed to do in order to be more credible along the way. So that's my story. So now let's look at some of the free items. And Mr. Johnson, thank you for joining, and thank you very much for the compliment. So let's start off with a few free items. Now, the one on the left is the one that I sign up on every Monday at 8 a.m. Now, Credit Karma, you've probably seen the commercials, you've probably seen the ads. It is a free website, and you'll get 2 scores for free. These are not FICO scores, though. So I don't want people thinking, oh, well, Credit Karma told me I got a 700. Well, that's because it is the Vantage 3.0 score that they're giving you. That's not FICO. I'm going to show you how you get your FICO, but in many cases, FICO does cost money, but that is the one that is the true score for 90% of your lenders. Now, I still use Credit Karma because I don't necessarily look at the score so much. I look at the material that's in it so that I can look at every category and be the best that I can be in every category. And I'm going to break it down for you in this presentation so that when you look at your Credit Karma, you can look at the 6 categories and say, okay, I'm good here. I need to do better here. I don't have anything here. So let me make sure that I got all the stuff that I need. WalletHub is also good. It updates daily, but it only updates the TransUnion report and score. So again, you got 2 free sites, but neither one is going to give you your FICO score, but it does give you enough information so that you can have a good start. Now, a couple of other apps. You have the Experian app that will give you only Experian, and it will give you the FICO score. It updates every monthly. It updates monthly rather, and you will have a FICO score. Now, if you want all 3 FICO scores, they do charge between $24.99 to $29.99 a month, but at least you will have the actual true FICO 8 score. And that's the one that I ask people to look at when they are ready to actually see if they qualify. Do not use the Credit Karma number. Like for instance, my Credit Karma score is like in the 830s, but that's not my real score. My real score is like 808, 809. So if you see a 700 on your Credit Karma, you're probably like at 650, 660. They're not going to tell you that. They're just going to say, hey, you may qualify for this credit card. Don't do it. It's free for a reason. There's advertising going on. And then Credit Sesame, it updates monthly, and they do offer the TransUnion report for a fee, but you're better off, in my opinion. Again, I'm not making any money off of these apps. I'm just giving you information for this is for educational, informational purposes from my personal experience. That's the disclaimer. I would say Experian app will give you the best bang for your buck, but don't do anything until you get closer to the time that you're actually going to apply for credit before you look at those. All right, so now we're about to get to some of the most important items in the presentation today, because what I want you to do is to be able to leave here today knowing more about how credit works than you did before you logged in. So what is a FICO score? It is a score that's between 300 and 850 that Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion use to determine whether you will be able to get credit extended to you. So these are just examples. The examples on the internet are somewhat different. And I'm going to talk about that too, because you do not want to believe everything that's on the internet. When I get to a particular slide, I'm going to let you know what the internet says, and I'm going to give you the truth. And they're 2 different things. So the first thing, if you look at a score that's less than 620, many lenders are going to say that you have poor credit, and you're probably going to get denied. But if you don't get denied, they're probably going to give you the worst interest rate on the market. So now let's talk about a 620 to a 679. This gives you a better chance of being approved, but there still is an average chance that you could be denied for credit. You won't get the interest rate that's advertised. You'll probably get a higher interest rate. Now, when you get to the high 6s to mid 7s, that's considered good credit. You still might get denied. It just depends on a few other categories, such as credit age and things like that. But let's make sure that we also look at everything else as far as your chances of being approved or denied and what type of interest rates you're looking at. You still might not get the one that's advertised and maybe a little bit higher, but you'll be doing better than the person that had the 620 or under. Just to give you a rule of thumb, anybody that's out there that's trying to buy a home, many of your lenders want you to have a middle FICO score of 640. And the reason is because you might be able to qualify for down payment assistance, many of the things that local and state government have. So I just gave you a little nugget right there. So your goal is to get a 640, not on Credit Karma. You want your FICO 640, and you want it to be your middle score. So if you got a 590, a 630, and a 650, they're going to look at that 630. And then let's look at the last item, which happens to be the 760 and above. That's considered excellent credit. You should be able to apply and receive anything with that. Now, I'm going to give you an exception to the rule. Here's another nugget. Here's another piece. So many of the people that I know have tried to apply for a Chase credit card. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Chase gives very nice credit cards, but I'm about to give you the cheat code for Chase. What you want to do is you want to have a working relationship with Chase before you apply for that card. Whether it's opening up a checking or a savings account. I know we don't have a Chase close to us. I think the closest one is in Nashville. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But you want to have a working relationship with them first. Then secondly, you want to make sure that your credit score is probably in the green or the blue before you qualify, because they look at a very high score. But here's the rub. They have something called a 524 rule. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up on Google, type in 5/24 rule, and it will talk about how this particular lender does not want you to have more than 5 pools within 24 months. So I'll let you look up that. But even if you have a perfect 850, if you're violating their 524 rule, you can still get declined. All right, let's go to the next slide. So now, as I said before, 90% of your lenders are going to look at FICO. And again, they look at your middle score. There was a recent study done 6 years ago that stated that over 9 out of 10 U.S. lending decisions deal with FICO. So again, you do not want the score that comes from, well, I'll put it this way. If you have credit cards or something like that, and they say, hey, we got a free score for you. If it's not FICO, it's not the real score. You want FICO. All right. That being said, let's now get to the most important slide out of all slides, ladies and gentlemen. This slide will either make you or break you. So we're going to take some time on this. And what I want people to be able to do is I'm going to explain each section. I usually have Q&A at the end, but I think that this slide is so important, I will allow some of the questions to be answered right here when I get to some of these particular slides. Now, if you look at this graphic, the FICO score is broken up into 5 pieces. And I tell folks, 80% of the game is doing 3 things. And I'm going to talk about that in detail. If you look, the biggest chunk is payment history. Payment history is 35% of your score. Amounts owed, and that only deals with revolving credit. Let me tell you what revolving credit is. Revolving credit is your line of credit, credit card, something that you can pay off and use over and over and over. So revolving credit is not your car note. Revolving credit is not your house note. Revolving credit is not an installment loan where when you pay it off, it's done. Revolving credit is you can run it up, pay it off, and do it over and over again. I wouldn't say run it up because you don't want to do that. And I'm going to talk about that in 2 slides. Length of credit history is 15%. Lenders want to see, do you have some credit age? Or are you new to the game? If you're new to the game, I need to know you a little bit more before you get these points. But if you've been in the game for 5, 10, 15 years, we know that you got a very long credit history. So you might be able to maximize that category. And then we're going to talk about the other 10% later. But I want to concentrate on the 80% that's payment history, amounts owed, and length of credit history, because I have people that I have helped remove negative items on their credit report. But the problem is this. Let's say that you don't have any of the 80% working for you, and you get and you have nothing but negative items on your credit report. Well, if all your negative items are removed and you don't have anything positive, all you got is a blank sheet of paper, which is the equivalent to no credit. And that's sometimes worse. So let's break it down. Let's talk about that right now, because this is probably the most important piece out of everything. 35% of your payment of your credit score is, did you pay your bills on time? That's all it is. If you're paying on time, you will maximize that score. If you miss one payment, remember my story about the bank where they put me down as being late by accident. I lost 100 points on a late payment. Let me also say this. I got people that say, well, if I pay it up, will they remove it? No. Unless you are able to call them yourself and say, hey, look, it was my mistake, and this, that, and the other, you might be able to get that removed. But you need to know now, a new late payment can take away 100 points average from your credit score. So if you got a 600 and you missed a payment, you might be down to 500 in 30 days. And that can stay on your report for up to 7 years. I know people that have missed a $10 minimum payment, and I'm like, are you going to lose 100 points over $10? We have to make sure that, hey, these are the rules. I didn't make the rules up. My people that are on here from the library, they didn't make the rules up, and I know you didn't make the rules up, but these are the rules that we have to follow. So if you want to maximize that, if you have a late payment, you could lose up to 100 points. Are there any questions in the chat concerning this section before I go to the next section? Because this is 35% of the game right here. Pay your bills on time, even if it's the minimum. You do not want a negative mark for not paying on time. Seeing no questions, we will now go to the next section. All right, let's talk about this. Now, this is where the internet is not telling you the truth. The amounts owed. Let me tell you what utilization ratio is. It is used to determine your available credit, and this is for revolving balances only. So think about all the credit cards that you have. Now, if you don't have any credit cards, we need to have a conversation about that when we get to another part of this category. I see the question about the student loans. I will get to that right after I talk about these 5 categories. So JC, I do see your question. I'll talk about that in a second. Thank you for your question. Utilization. Let's say that you got a $500 credit card, and that's the only credit card you got to your name, $500. Let's say that you have run up that credit card to $450. Well, if I want to know what your utilization ratio is, I'm going to take 450, which is your balance. I'm going to divide that by 500, which is your limit. And it's going to come out to be 90%. Let me tell you what the algorithm does. The algorithm looks at that like, oh, you spent 90% of your available credit. Let's drop that credit score. That's exactly what they do. Now, I know some of y'all like, well, it's only $500. It doesn't matter. They look at the percentage. They want to see, are you being very, like how some of the folks say, thirsty over your credit? It's real bad if you only got a $200 credit card to your name, because I know you may run it up. But let me tell you what you have to do in order to maximize your score in this category. You see that bold percentage? 10% is what you want to be at or less. I know some of y'all like, wait a minute, the internet said 30%. The internet's not telling you the truth. 30% is, that's basically your cap. If you go over 30%, you're flirting with fire. So if you have a $500 credit card, you need to be at $50 or less by the time the bill is due. I'm going to give you a cheat code right now on what to do. If you have that credit card, this is what you do. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. So let's say again that you have a $500 credit card to your name. All right, $500 only. Now, you get the bill. The bill says that the minimum payment is due on, let's just say, the 1st of the month. Okay? Your goal is, wait a minute, if I owe $400 some odd dollars out of 500, what did Dr. Ford just tell me to do? I need to be at 10%. What's 10% of 500? $50. That means I need to get it down to $50 or less by the time the bill is due. But here's the cheat code, y'all. You can do one of 2 things. Look at your bill and see when the statement cycle is, the billing cycle. Because sometimes that billing cycle was a 28 to 31 day billing cycle. Let me tell you why they have that billing cycle. That billing cycle was there to determine what they report to the credit bureaus. So let's say that my bill is due on the 1st. My billing cycle might not be over until the 5th. If the billing cycle ends on the 5th, that means 9 times out of 10, that credit card is going to report the next day. You know, I get a lot of people that come to me saying, well, I paid it off and they didn't change the numbers. They don't change the numbers right when you pay it off. You have to know your billing cycle end date. And it is usually 3 to 5 days after the due date. So I tell folks, if they can't find all of that, this is what you can do. If your due date is on the 1st or whatever the day may be, get your bill down to 10% or less. Wait 5 days for them to report, which is usually the same time around the billing cycle ending. And if you have to use that card again, wait until they report the new balance. Because if you don't and you run it back up, they're going to report the higher balance. And what's going to happen to your score? Drop. I know when all of my billing cycles are. I know when all of my due dates are. And I've noticed, I've even played around with it. And I'm like, what if I'm a day off? Will they report the higher balance? They do. So I just want you to know that that's almost a third of your credit score right there. So if you have maxed out your cards, pay them all down and wait the 30 days and look at your score. And then come back to me and let me know what happened. All right. So let's see. And JC, I haven't forgot about you yet. I'm just going to talk about student loans later when I get to that point. Let me get to a couple other questions. Would the FICO show the utilization ratio in the report, or is this something I need to keep tabs on manually? Okay. So some of those free options that we talked about will do the utilization for you, so you don't have to do it, but it's not going to be on the actual report. So, for example, Credit Karma will give you what your utilization is, and it will break it down for you. You just have to make sure that you know what all of your due dates are and your billing period end dates are so that you can manage that accordingly. Let's see, Anthony Johnson. Okay. Your question is, what if I max my card out and pay it off full every month? Also, what if I pay the bill twice a month and pay a little month? All right, so there's a myth to that. You got some people that say, well, if I do 2 payments in a month, it's going to report on the credit report twice. That's not true, people. I've seen that on Instagram. I've seen that all over the place. This is what they do. And look, I got about 17 years worth of credit, and I played around with my score in a lot of these things. What you want to do is, whenever that billing cycle is over, you want your balance to be as low as possible before, Anthony, you do the maxing of your card or whatever. Now, I would not recommend maxing your card out, because let's say that you get, and hear me out when I say this. Let's say you got a $500 card and you got a $29 annual fee. You may forget that month that your annual fee is due. If you max out that card and they add that $29 fee, now you're over. So not only are you paying $529, you got to pay the overage fee and everything else. So you will be more than 100% over on your credit card. You might be at 125, 130%. And that's going to kill this right here. That 30% for your amounts owed will be ruined. So what I would say is, if you max it out, you're flirting with fire in a way. You just have to make sure that you pay that thing back down before any other things may happen. I wouldn't even want to be close to 90% because you don't know what may happen. But as far as making sure that you have the 35%, which is paying the bills on time, think about this, folks. I just talked about 65% of the game. Pay the bills on time and pay the credit cards down to 10% or less. That's 65% of the game right there. So I just want to make sure that people do things responsibly And I also want to make sure you don't go back and be like, well, Dr. Ford said I can max out my card. No, I didn't say anything like that at all. Even though we're recorded, I'm saying this on the record. I did not say max out your cards. I'm saying pay them things down to 10% or under. And I tell you what, so I won't forget the student loan question. Let me go ahead and talk about that now because we're getting a lot of questions in the chat and I don't want to forget JC. So student loans, JC, are installment loans. And many of those loans are ones that you get from the federal government unless you get a private loan. So you got your Sallie Mae, your Navient, and others. What happens with installment loans, especially around this time, I know that the federal government is doing a lot of things. I would say make sure that you have in writing any type of deferment, any type of forbearance, or if your situation has changed in the pandemic, you let them know as quickly as possible, because I know people that have called them and they've gotten their payment down to as little as $5 a month. What you don't want to do is to miss. That's the worst thing you can do. I'd rather people call in and say, hey, I got a pandemic COVID-19 related situation going on. Can you help me? Because if you don't call, they're not going to know your situation. So let me go back to your question with student loans being frozen because of the pandemic. Is it still smart to pay those down if you have a negative history with them? All right. If you have a negative history with them, there's two different types of negative history.
98.2.
You could have negative history as far as being late, but you could also have negative history as far as being in default. Now, I don't know which one you're talking about.
Good to see you.
I haven't seen you in a while.
I know.
Wang Ying, I can hear you. You might want to turn your mic off. And it's good to see that person as well that you were talking to. Okay. But anyway, back to the student loans. If they're in default, I would tell anybody this. When they're in default, they go to a collection agency. That collection agency basically wants their money. The best thing for you to do is to go into a student loan rehabilitation program. And let me tell you what that's about. What you're going to do is going to be based on what type of discretionary money you have. And what you'll do is you will fill out that documentation and you will work out a deal to where you make, I want to say, either 9 or 10 payments, monthly payments. After you do that successfully, what you're going to do is you're going to find out that the collection agency that has your student loans will give them back to the government. But let me say this. You only get one time to do that. If you go in default twice, it's game over. So what I recommend is, if you're in default, go into the rehab program with your loans. You're going to be able to make 9 or 10 payments in a row monthly. That will get your loans out of default, and the collection agency will give them back to the government, basically. After you do that, this is what you want to do immediately after that. If you see your credit report have about 10 or 15 of those loans all separated, you want to consolidate them. Consolidate those loans and get an income-based repayment structure to where you will be able to make that monthly payment that goes along with what you can afford. And I've seen people have a monthly payment as low as $10 a month after they go through that process. And it takes those loans out of collection status, which is negative. So even though, yes, it may take about a year for you to do it, think about where you're at now and think about where you can be. And it took me 2 years to get from a 490 to 18, but I had to have ownership of what was going on. Thank you for that question regarding the student loans. I did not want to forget it, so I decided to go ahead and talk about that. Let me see if there's any other questions real quick. No. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Length of credit history. All right. They're going to look at you're more than welcome, JC. Length of credit history. Credit card. I'll put it this way. With credit cards, I know people that will get a new credit card, and what they'll find out is, why did my length of credit history go down? Well, they're not looking at the length, they're looking at the average. So when you look at your Credit Karma or something like that, what they're going to do is they're going to look at your average history as well as the length of the oldest thing that you have on your credit report. Like for me, for example, I probably have about 8 years worth of credit history now. But my oldest, interestingly, JC, my oldest credit is my student loans. I still owe a significant amount of my student loans, but they're on time, and I have about 16 to 17 years of age on them. So my student loans are actually helping me. So length of credit history, if you close an account, you lose that credit history. So let's say you got a Macy's card for $1,000, but you rarely use it. Well, if you close that account out and it's 12 years old, you just lost 12 years of credit history. We all have to start somewhere. So if you have no credit, you could do something that I'm going to talk about later, but there are good and bad things concerning some tricks that I have for you. And I'm not going to consider them tricks. I'm just going to say these are avenues that you can go in order to help you as far as your credit is concerned. So let's do a quick recap. 80% of the game is this. 80% of the game is pay your bills on time. Get those credit card balances down to 10% or less. Age your credit. That's all 80% of the game is. So if you learn anything today, if you pay those bills on time and don't miss, and you keep your credit card balances down to 10% or less, and you age your credit, that's 80% of the game. You can work on getting collections off and all that other stuff separately. You got to have both work together. So the last 20% is credit mix. In the algorithm, they like to see you have revolving credit as well as installment credit. And I'm going to give you a little cheat code at the end for those who have none of this. I'm going to show you what you can do in order to start you off. And then lastly in the category is new credit. So new credit is every time you get your credit pulled. Now, there's something called a hard inquiry, and there's something called a soft inquiry. Soft inquiries do not affect your credit score. Soft inquiries are when a credit card company or a lender pulls your credit to see if they're going to send you something in the mail. And some of you probably get that in the mail where they're saying, hey, you may qualify for this Credit One card, or you may qualify for this Capital One card. There is a difference between Credit One and Capital One. You may qualify for this American Express or this MasterCard or this Visa. I'm going to tell folks right now, just because you get it in the mail doesn't mean that you have to apply for it. You got to have a little discipline. But that's called a soft inquiry. A hard inquiry is when you do the initiating. I'm trying to get this credit card. Let me apply online. I'm trying to see if I can get this car. Let me go into the dealership. I'm trying to get this house, so let me work with ABC Lending Company. And it is okay to shop around, but you have to shop within a 15-day period. Now, here is a brand new slide. So for the people that are online or in the chat, nobody has seen this slide before. You're the first ones. So I made this just for y'all. You have to ask yourself this question first. Are you serious about launching off your credit, and are you going to follow the rules? Now, I know some of y'all are like, okay, that's a rhetorical question, right? In a way, it's not, because I know some people that would get excited over this entire presentation, but then after this presentation is over, they go back to the same habits, and they don't do any of this stuff that's on here. And that's a problem. I just got to be honest with you. I mean, this is what I had to look at when I had that 490 credit score. I had to be honest with myself. So I'm not trying to say that in a negative perspective. I'm just simply saying, if you are really serious about making sure that your credit is the best that it can be, so that you can teach your daughter, your son, your niece, your nephew, your parents, your spouse, this is what you have to do. So let's look at these 5 things. Number 1, do not be late on any of your bills. I know this is repeat, but I need to emphasize this. A late payment can drop your entire credit score up to 100 points and can stay on your credit reports up to 7 years. This is 35% of your score. Now, I know some people who like self-reporting, such as with Experian Boost, or they want to self-report their utilities, or they want to self-report their rent. Okay, and I'm just going to base this on experience. I'm not against any of those things, but you better be paying your bills on time, because why would you want to pay for a service that's going to report your utilities or your rent and you're late on either one or both? That's a self-inflicted wound. Number two, don't run up those credit cards. The best percent to be at is 1%. For some reason, what I've noticed through my experience is if you have 0%, you don't get all the points. If you got 1%, that's how you can maximize your score in that 30% category. So the best is 1%, and I'm only using my experience on that. When I've tried 0 before, I've even had lenders at Regions Bank and Bank of America say, leave a little bit on. You can still pay it off. You don't have to pay interest, but leave a small balance, pay that balance off, and move on so that you can maximize your score in there. Because for some reason, they don't like seeing 0%, because you could be that person with that just got some money and says, all right, I'm gonna just pay off everything every month. Number three, don't close those cards that have age on them. Let me talk about this a little bit. So, JC talked about the pandemic a little bit. So you have credit card companies now that are closing accounts that are not being used. Think about why they're doing that. Well, if I got a $5,000 credit card and I don't use it, that means they're not making any money. They're going to try to find somebody else to go make that money off of. So I tell folks, even if you got a card and you're not really using it, I recommend using it every 3 months just to keep it active. Because think about it. Let's say that you got $3,000 worth of credit to your name. You got a $2,000 credit card, a $500 credit card, and another $500 credit card. Okay. Let's say that you have spent $1,000 out of 3,000. Okay, that's 33%. We don't want 33%. We want to be down lower. But you haven't touched that $2,000 credit card. You're like, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to Macy's. I'm not going here. Let's say that the credit card company says, oh, you haven't used it, because they'll put that on your credit report, closed due to inactivity. And then they snatch the $2,000 card away from you. You're in trouble. Because think about it. If your $2,000 credit card is gone and you maxed out the 500s, you went from 33% utilization to a full cap 100%. Your credit score just dropped significantly. I know some of y'all like, ooh, yes, exactly. And that's 1/3 of your credit score almost. Number four, stop applying for credit flying blind. I know people that will do that. Well, I just had to try. No, you didn't. Know what you got before you pull the trigger. And then, as I said before, if you want items that are self-reported, please follow rules 1 through 4. It makes no sense to use self-reporting constructs such as rent reporters, self-inc, Experian Boost if you're not following rules 1 through 4. Why would you allow creditors to know, oh, well, Sam and Susie both have self-reported items and they're not even paying their bills. And if they're self-reporting, I know exactly where they live and all that other stuff. Okay, denied. We got to use some common sense, folks, on some of this stuff. All right, so here's a scenario that happened, because I tell folks I also look at doing credit repair, but this happened last June. Now, this lady ended up getting a $400 credit card, $2,500 credit card from Navy Federal Credit Union. Now, I remember her scenario because she was trying to buy a house. And she ended up getting a Navy Federal credit card that graduated from a secured card where you have to put up your own money to an unsecured card where the lender takes the risk. Look at the right side. I want you to see that. This is a very important slide. On June the 27th, her score went down 65 points. Now, we were trying to get her to that 640. She went down 65 points. Look what she did. She had 2% utilization, which is awesome, in May. Then she decided, oh, I need this here. I need this here. Let me buy this. Let me buy this. Let me buy this. Ran that card up 91%. Score went down 65 points. She ended up contacting me saying, I thought you were supposed to help me. It's your fault that my score went down. I'm like, ma'am, I don't have $2,207 worth of things in my garage at the house. I'm like, let me go check my garage again. Nope. I don't have anything in there. Nope. I just got an old refrigerator and a couple other items. I don't have $2,200 worth of stuff that got bought on a Navy Federal credit card. Point I'm trying to make is you got to make sure that those habits are not one-offs. You got to continue doing this. And then I tell folks, if you can't manage $100, you can't manage 1,000. If you can't manage 1,000, you can't manage 10,000. We started her off with a $200 credit card. Then when it graduated to $2,500, then this happened. She lost 65 points. So when you look at what was lost, what do you think the case was? What needed to be done so that she could be back on track? She has to pay that thing back down because that's 1/3 of your credit score right there. We got too many people that have the want and not necessarily the desire to establish, and I have to emphasize, keep good credit. I know some people that ask me, how can I get a 700 credit score in 30 days legally? I'm like, there's no way. Now, they're starting off with nothing. Now, they have a good foundation, they may be able to get there, but I'm talking about a person that has 5 collections. They don't have one positive item to their name, and they want a 700 credit score in 4 weeks. But they got 4 years worth of negative items. We have to think realistically. So again, I just want to make sure that I'm giving y'all the real talk. I don't want to necessarily give you something fluffy so that you can feel good later. I want you to have this as a learning experience so that you can learn from somebody who went from a 490 to 800 what the rules of the game are. So let's talk about how to create this credit and how to establish it and build it over time. All right. So what is credit again? It's the ability to pay your bills on time for a determined period of time. And it's important to show proof over time that you're able to pay. So let me give you a few options. I'm going to start from the hardest to the easiest on this. Again, you can have all your negative items taken off, but if you don't have anything positive, you have a blank slate, which is equivalent to no credit, which is worse than bad credit on many occasions. So I'm going to start with the blue, then I'm going to go to the orange, then the gray, then the yellow. Now, I would not recommend the first item unless you have a great relationship with somebody at your bank or your credit union who will know what's needed for you to qualify. I say apply for a small loan if you're able to. Now, a small loan is an installment loan. If you're not able to apply for a small loan, there is, as I said before, a company called Self. Now, I'm gonna give you the good and the bad for all of these. The good is Self will report every month in the form of an installment loan so that you can have that report. You want it reporting on time, that's 35%. And this is where the 30% doesn't count because it is an installment loan. But you also want the age, so that's 15% of your score. So 50% of your score you get through a small loan. Now, here is the rub. If you apply for a self loan and you're basically putting debt on your report. But if you don't pay that self on time and that money doesn't come out on time, I have seen self lender reports as negative because the people didn't have the $12 or the $15 a month coming out. And it goes back to what I said before. Why do you want to report something where you're not following the rules and you're hurting yourself? All right, let's go to apply for credit cards with small limits. There are credit card companies. Again, I don't make anything off of any of these companies, but you got some credit card companies like your First Premiers or your Credit Ones where you might be able to get that credit card, but they're going to get, here's the rub. They're going to either give you excessive fees or a very high interest rate or a combination of both. So hypothetically, let's say that you get one of those cards and you qualify for a $300 credit card, where there may be a $100 fee to get that card with a 29.99% interest rate. So essentially, you really don't have a $300 card. You might really have a $150 card if you count the interest and how much it costs in order to have the privilege of having that card. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I have one of those cards because I started off from scratch. But the only reason why I still have that card now is because that card is 11 years old. Hint, hint, age. I'm still paying $9 a month on a card that I'm not using. But again, it's because of age. Until these other items get age, I have to keep that card. Otherwise, 15% of my credit score may drop. All right, so now let's talk about this one a little bit. Now, I am the Senior Financial Literacy Coordinator. I am not a matchmaker. I do not have a psychology degree where I can specialize in couples therapy or anything like that when I say this. But before you sign your wet signature on anything, whether it's with your significant other or otherwise, I would recommend y'all have that talk. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you two examples. I have a good friend of mine who co-signed on an apartment with her mom and her sibling. What happened was they got away from that apartment complex, and anybody that signed on for that apartment complex got hit with a collection. Now, my friend didn't even live in the apartment. But when it all boiled down, a friend of mine lost 140 points over something that she did not even live in, but she signed her name off. I got a friend in Nashville. Her husband makes six figures, but his habits are atrocious when it comes to credit. Unfortunately, she signed off on everything as a joint, as somebody that has a joint responsibility. I'm going to tell you right now, if you sign off with somebody, if he's late, so are you. If she's late, so are you. Again, I'm not trying, you got to have these conversations. So if you become a co-borrower, I'm going to talk about co-borrower first. If you become a co-borrower on a credit card or somebody else's loan, again, if that person's late, so are you. If you know this person and you know that they have the best credit habits, then I would recommend, hey, be a co-borrower or co-signer. But if you are not sure about their habits, you please be careful about signing your name off. And then let's talk about authorized users. Now, I know some of you may say, well, hey, if I got an AU, that's going to help me with credit history and everything else because it's going to copy and paste that other person's credit, right? Yes, but, and I had this session at Manhood University and WOWS when we talked about this specifically. One of the ladies was asking me, why does my daughter want me to take her off as an authorized user? I'm the one that helped her with her credit when she turned 18. She's 25 now. She has 7 years of credit history and all of that. Well, why is she asking me to take her off? I asked her one question. You probably know what I asked her. How much of the credit card have you spent? Oh, well, it's a $6,000 credit card, and I've spent about $5,800. I'm like, that's the problem. You're hurting her there. She was like, oh, it's the 30%. Yeah. So even though you're helping her, giving her 7 years worth of credit, you're hurting her in the other category. So unless that authorized user follows all the 4 rules that I've talked about, you have to be careful. And then lastly, this is the easiest thing to do, but you have to come out your own money. You would apply for a secure credit card or loan. So this is what happens with this. Let's say you go to a Bank of America and you say, hey, I'm trying to reestablish my credit. They have an option called secured credit cards. What you'll do is you're basically putting your own money up as your limit, and they're going to use that money as collateral to see if you're going to follow the rules. So let's say that you do follow the rules. Now, I know Bank of America does this. I know Navy Federal Credit Union does this, but not every credit union and bank does this. But there are some. This is where you have to ask the questions. Let's say you put $300 up, and they hold your $300. They're going to give you a secure credit card for $300, minus the annual fee or whatever the case may be. Now, let's say you follow all the rules that Dr. Ford taught you today. You're paying your bills on time. You're keeping the balances low. You have particular banks and credit unions that will say, oh, Mr. Jones, oh, Miss Sanders, you are following all the rules. So I tell you what we'll do. You know that $300 that you gave us? After 4 to 6 months, maybe 8 months, we're going to give you that money back, and we're going to take the risk. And we may up your credit card limits. I've seen people do that. I've only seen one that took their own money and blew it. Because think about it. There's also a bad to that. If you're giving somebody $300 and you're not following the rules and you're doing what you want, and then it ends up being a collection, you just gave the bank $300 and they gave you back negative credit history because you didn't follow the rules. So again, self-inflicted wounds is what we don't want. We want to know the rules to the game. We want to play the game very well. Are there any questions? Because we're going to change it up just a little bit, and I'm going to talk about what you should do in order to make sure that all your components are straight. I'm going to talk about the Credit Karma factors next, but are there any questions before we get to that? If you're typing, I'll give you about 30 to 45 seconds to type your question. How many people have learned a lot since we started at 105? We're going to have some Q&A at the end. I just want to make sure that, hey, if there's something that we have not gone over, we will go over that. But I also want to make sure that you have learned something along the way that you may not have necessarily learned before. All right, very good, very good. All right, so now let's talk about this. And if you want to take a picture of the screenshot, that's fine as well. How to read your Credit Karma factors. So now I'm going to use my personal experience on this. In fact, I'm going to show you a screenshot of my 800 on what I have in a second too. So these 6 boxes are the 6 boxes that you're going to see whether you have the Credit Karma app or if you look at it on your laptop or desktop or tablet. The 6 boxes represent how the credit score is calculated. But again, remember, Credit Karma scores are not FICO scores. Do they still use the same categories? Yes. Are the scores going to be the same? No. But we can use this as the model so that we can determine what we need to do by the time we get off of the call so that I can look at my Credit Karma and say what needs to be improved, if anything. So let's look at credit card utilization. That's the first box in the top left. What did we learn today? We need to be under 10%. So what I would recommend to you is have your credit card utilization between 1 to 10%. And Credit Karma is good to let you know what your balances are in contrast to your limits. So I will give that. One of the people in the chat asked about that. So that's where you can start looking at, ooh, I've maxed out this card. Let me do this. And whatnot. All right, so 1 to 10% is where you should be. Now, let's look at payment history. This is every time you have paid a bill on time. So let's say that you got 10 things going at the same time active. Well, let's say that you've paid all 10 items on time. That means you got 10 positive marks that are happening each month. And 10 out of 10 is 100%. Then let's say that you got 10 positive marks again the next month. Now you're 20 out of 20. Let's say you do it the next month, 30 out of 30. The next month, 40 out of 40. It's looking great. However, there are some people that will not get the 100%. Because remember, if you're late one time, you're already down to 99%. If you're late 2 times, depending on what's being reported, you might be down to 89%, which is awful. So let me tell you what you should be at. You should be no lower than 98%. We all have our mistakes. There was a student loan late payment that did not fall off of my report until a few years ago, and I disputed it the best way that I could. I was at 760 for the longest time, and then when that item finally fell off, I had perfect 100% payment history, and that's when I finally got to 800. So through my experience, if you want an 800 credit score, you can never be late. If you got one late, you're not getting to 800. Just be honest. All right, so if you're under 98%, you got to fix it. So payment history and derogatory marks go together because every time you're late, derogatory mark. If any collection you got, derogatory. Repossession, derogatory. Chapter 7 or 13, derogatory. Excuse me. We can all make that one mistake. When they see 2 mistakes, they're like, okay, you're pushing it. If you have 3 or more mistakes, they're going to start looking at you like, no, I don't think I can really look at you as somebody that I will offer credit to, or I'm about to up that interest rate. So I would say have no more than 1. If you got 2, try to get that second one fixed. I think 1 is your limit. Okay. Age of credit history. I'm just going to say the older, the better. But if you want to start looking at your score going up, you want to have at minimum 5 years of credit history. If you want your score to be very high, you want 7 years of credit history. But we all have to start somewhere. So if you're new to this, credit history is just going to come. I mean, you can go be an authorized user if you want to and have somebody copy and paste their history to you. But remember, again, you can't control their habits. So for example, if your uncle put you down as an authorized user, he may say, hey, I had an issue regarding the pandemic. I got to run my credit card up. If you're an authorized user, copy paste. Now, some of your numbers are going to be messed up. So again, you just got to know the risks, folks. Total accounts, the more the merrier. My recommendation to you is to have at least 5 running at one time. In fact, my personal cheat code to those who are starting off for credit is to have at least 2. I'm going to repeat this twice. Have at least 2 revolving and 2 installment items going at the same time. I'm going to say it again. 2 revolving, which is like 2 credit cards, whether it's secured or unsecured, and 2 installment loans. I know some people that use rent reporters. I know some people that use Self Inc. I know some people that will get a small loan because they got the relationship with their bank. But I would say if you want the best bang for your buck and you want to see the scores increase, 2 revolving, 2 installment. Now, some of these you might already have, so you just have to look at your reports. And then hard inquiries. Remember, this is when you have your your credit reports pulled. Again, you don't want to look like you're being overly dependent on credit. My recommendation to you is hard inquiries fall off in 24 months. So they don't stay on forever. My recommendation within a 24-month period, don't have more than 4. In a 24-month period, do not have more than 4. That's why if you're trying to get that car off the dealership's lot, remember, they pull your credit all over the place. So you might be over 4 before you leave the lot. That's why it's important to have, if you can, third-party financing or a letter from your lender saying, hey, he qualifies or she qualifies for this. Again, you don't want them pulling your credit all over the place, and then you find out that you got 7 pulls on your Equifax, 6 on your Experian, and 9 on your TransUnion, and then you still didn't get the car. That's just awful right there. And as you can see, 80% of your credit of the credit game is right there again. So now let's look at some examples. If we look at this example, look at that first category. Oh, that person's doing well, 4%. That's what we want. Payment history, they've never missed. That's excellent. And if they never miss, that means they have no derogatory marks. That's beautiful. But I don't think they have a 700 credit score yet, because look at that age of credit history. They just started off, which is fine, because remember, age is only 15%. But that person's killing it in the other categories. Credit card utilization, that's 35% of the score. Bam. Payment history with derogatory marks, that's 30% of your, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Credit card utilization, that's 30% of the credit score. Look at that percent. That's beautiful. Payment history and derogatory marks are 35% of your score. And those first 3 green boxes are 65% of the game. Total accounts, got a lot of accounts, that's good. And they've gotten their credit pulled 3 times within a 2-year period. So they haven't gotten to 4 yet, but they're there, and they're at 3, so that's why it's yellow. So they're probably in the high 6s. Now, let's look at this. Credit card usage, that's too much. You've used half of your credit. You got to get that down, but everything else is looking good. 100% payment history, no derogatory marks. Credit age is over 7 years. That's beautiful. Total accounts, 23 accounts, and then they've only had their credit pulled 1 time. And let me talk about this too. You should always do a Google search to determine what credit card, no, let me say it right. Do a Google search and determine what credit reporting agency each lender uses. For example, 99.9% of the time, American Express pulls Experian, and that's it. Chase, through my experience, pulls 2 out of the 3 reports randomly. Capital One pulls all 3. Synchrony Bank pulls TransUnion only. The Apple Card, TransUnion only. Always do your search first, because I wouldn't want you to come and say, hey, I got a 760 on my Equifax, but they didn't pull your Equifax. They pulled your TransUnion, which was a 610. A lot of people don't know that. That's another nugget for you. And if you want to see what my 800 looks like, there it is. Trust me, it did not look like that a few years ago. If you've ever seen a commercial back in the day where they were talking about Credit Karma, and they had this lady, she had a 750 looking like a little furry dog. And she was like, oh, nice little 750. You're doing everything. It would catch the ball. It would do all types of stuff. But then in that same commercial, her dog didn't look like a 750. It was a 509, and the dog was tearing up the couch. It left some stuff on the carpet and all of that. That's what my credit score looked like. But now it's pristine like this. So if you want to see what 800 looks like, there you go. And I believe anybody who's watching and listening can get there as well. So now in the last parts, people, let's talk about this. for the next 10 or so minutes, and then we are going to take some Q&A. 35% of your credit score again. I know some of this is repeat. If you have a late payment, that late payment can stay on your report for 7 years. Check all 3 of your credit scores because they're all not going to be the same, most likely, and some of the stuff that reports may not be the same. All right. With that being said, now I've given you a lot of information. You got all this new credit and you follow the directions, but now it's time for us to make sure that we're responsible because you do not want to apply for too much credit at one time. This is not a quick fix overnight. Results will come. Again, it took me 2 years to get from a 490 to a perfect 800. And there were trials and tribulations. As I said before, I learned the game so well, I got sued 2 more times. But I knew that they violated my rights as far as the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And I use that to my advantage. So now let's say you got some things that you want to fix. I've talked about how to put good stuff on, but I've not talked about how to get bad stuff off. You do have credit repair companies that are out there, but I would tell anybody, if you put in the sweat equity, you can do it yourself. But it does take work, and you have to be patient. So let me talk about the 4 bullet points, and then I'm going to give you the last 9 minutes of this, and then we're going to have some Q&A together. First of all, you got to make it routine to check your credit reports for any changes and make sure the personal information about you is accurate. I'm not telling you anything different that a credit repair company is doing, a reputable one anyway. Then look at any errors you see on your reports, whether it's inaccurate, obsolete, past the statute of limitations, whether it's different across the credit bureaus, because by law, they have to report accurately. You probably heard Johnny Cochran back in the day say, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. How about this? If they can't prove it, they must remove it. And then make sure that you create a budget that compiles what negative items could be paid in full or settled with removal from the credit report. Now, let me say this. A lot of people I know get in trouble when they get these calls and these letters. Now, in good intention, you do want to settle and this, that, and the other. But I tell folks this. If there are questions about particular items on your report and you get the call that's being monitored for quality assurance, I don't admit anything over the phone. I want documentation. And you want documentation too. Think about it. If Dr. Ford, me, called you right now and said you owe me $500, you would hang up in my face. But now, if I changed my voice and I said I'm ABC Collection Agency on behalf of whoever, and you owe me $500, and now you're saying that you may have given them some conversation, I'm like, wow, you should have treated them like you treated Dr. Ford. Because you don't know who's on the other side of that phone. And you never want to finish all your business on the phone. You want them to give you straight documentation. So let's say, for example, there is a questionable item that a company says you owe $300 for. Now, let me say this. That collection agency, on average, only paid 8 cents on the dollar for your alleged debt. So if you owed $1,000, that collection agency, on average, probably only spent $80 on your file. That's a fact. I can give you the empirical evidence that backs that up. And I'm going to talk about the red flags on the credit report, Ernest, in a second after this. So this is what I would do. Let's say you got a collection on your report and you decide that you want to settle up because you're not claiming that it's yours necessarily. Because I tell folks, look, don't admit anything because it could be inaccurate. It could be obsolete. But if you're trying to get it off of your report, you can simply say, hey, I looked at my report and I've done my inventory, and it appears that there's something on my report that's very questionable for $300. I would like to go ahead and either pay the $300 or you figure out what you want to do. I tell folks start with 25%, because if they only paid 8%, then you can negotiate that. But here is what you have to do. Otherwise, don't do it. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Do not give them your credit card information over the phone. Do not do any type of settlement without it in writing saying that they're going to do a full removal from your credit report. Because here's what's important. Here's one of the red flags right here, Ernest. You got people that will settle with these agencies that may not even be licensed by the state to do business. And you just gave them money and they didn't change one thing on your report, but you just gave them some money. Well, they said they were going to do it over the phone. Do you have it in writing? No, but you just played yourself. If it's not in writing, it doesn't count. If it's not in writing, it doesn't count. And you want a full removal. You don't want settled. You don't want paid. You want paid as agreed, but you don't want just the word paid. That's still negative and a red flag on your report. And I see too many people that say, well, I just wanted to get it off of my report. But did you get it in writing? No, I gave them my credit card information over the phone. Why did you do that? I've seen it, y'all. It almost happened to me. But this is what you have to do. You're going to be your own credit repair agency. Wait a minute. But this is what you have to do. You have to organize. You have to do inventory. You have to report every 30 to 45 days if you send disputes. And you have to follow up. If you're going to do it yourself, you have to do these 4 things. That's what credit repair companies do. Reputable ones. So what they simply do is they look at a trade line like this. A trade line simply is your credit report history. So let's say that you got a credit report that has a trade line that looks like this. It'll have all your little information on it. And it's up to you to see what's inaccurate, obsolete, statute of limitations, all of that. Just in case anybody needs to know, the statute of limitations on a Chapter 13. Well, I'll put it this way. The statute of limitations for most items is 7 years. But you also want to look at your state because each state is different. And I know with the Chapter 7, it can stay on your report for up to 10 years. So you want to look at your trade lines. And then here is your startup kit. I only have a couple of slides left. I would recommend getting one of those expanding file folders that looks like an accordion. Make sure you got envelopes and stamps. I recommend you do certified mail because you don't want the 3 credit bureaus to say, oh, I never received it. That's part of your organizing and your inventory. Have your calendar and phone log. We all have smartphones. I still have a BlackBerry, but it has a calendar and it tells me when to check my Credit Karma every Monday. And then pen and paper. Because what you're going to do is, this is how you dispute. Be ready to have a 30 to 60 day timeline during the disputes because of COVID, the credit bureaus have up to 45 days upon receipt to respond back to you. So here's the roadmap. In fact, this is my next to last slide. First thing you're going to do is you're going to check your credit reports for errors. You're going to create your portfolio saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is obsolete, wrong date, this is questionable, this is not mine. You just come up with your items. Then you're going to dispute and mail off your certified letters. Do not dispute online. You are giving up particular rights if you dispute online. If you were successful on some, congratulations. But as a practice, I would say no. Then keep all your documents in order and send. I'm gonna tell you what this is. Method of verification. So let me take a step back. First thing you'll do is you'll send a letter to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion separately. You will say, hey, I see some items that look questionable. You will list the items and the account numbers and all of that. Type it all up. Do not sign the letter. I've seen people in court today where some of these shady folks will take your signature, they will put it on a fake contract and say, oh, well, this is you. And they're in court right now for forgery. I know y'all like, wow. Another red flag, Ernest. You talk about red flags, there are red flags all over this slide right here on what I'm talking about. So do not sign it, but you're going to send them to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Then we wait 45 days. Best case scenario, they take those items off. Yay, congratulations. Then you do it again. I would recommend you do 5 at a time. Now, let's say they come back and say, oh, it's verified. You know, we did our investigation. I don't know you did anything. You could have just run out of time and you decided to say, oh, it's verified. Let me just send you something so you can go away. Again, if you can't prove it, you must remove it. An MOV letter is a method of verification letter. And if you want to go online and look for one, do not copy and paste one and use it as your own, because there is software called eOscar that they use to see if you got it from a website. And they will call your item frivolous and they will not look at it. So please don't plagiarize. Method of verification, you're asking them to give you documentation to prove that you are responsible for that negative item. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I recommend that they give you something in writing that has your signature on it. Not a bill, not something they could put on Microsoft Word. They have to give you real method of verification. They have to do that within 15 days. Now, let me also give you this. Now, when you start disputing, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get a lot of phone calls because you have poked the bear. So be ready for those 800 numbers, them 877s, those area codes from people from cities you ain't never been to and all of that. Just be ready because you have poked the bear. But remember all the things that I just told you to do. Then there's going to be some that you're not going to be able to get rid of. So that's where I say pay those bills within your budget, pay off negative trade lines that can be removed. And it's going to be patience that you got to have. I've seen some people take 3 months to get things done, and I've seen people that take 17 months to get done. Everybody's situation is different. So you will wash, rinse, and repeat here. And this is what credit repair companies do. Again, you can do it yourself. But as I go back to a slide, if you are not going to give this, if you're not going to organize, you might as well forget the other 3. If you're not going to keep your inventory up, if you're not going to report back and follow up, then there's no need for you to embark on that. Now, I know we all have things that we do part of our life. So it's all about sacrifice at the end of the day. I remember working 65 hours a week and getting my credit fixed because that's what I wanted. I felt violated when that $3,200 came out of my account because of a college debt that the statute of limitations passed, but some collection agency re-aged the debt illegally and took my $3,200. Now, I know some people are like, well, you owed $1,000. And you know what? They're absolutely right. I spent $1,000 I didn't pay them back on. But $3,200 when they ran it up, that was a violation. But I had to put on my big pants and I had to say I'm going to take ownership of my situation. So I'm going to take these next 15 minutes to answer any questions that people have within credit repair and restoration. I hope that you enjoyed this, but if there's any questions, let's go ahead and entertain those. Even if it's people in the library that got questions, I am open to those as well. And what I'll do is around 2:55, what I'll do is if you have enjoyed this session. We have more sessions within the library that we're going to have this week and next week. But as far as credit is concerned, are there any questions, or did I do such a great job that there are no more questions at all? We still have 15 minutes. Ernest, you've been to many of my sessions. Why don't you go ahead and start the questions off? Why don't you go ahead and be the icebreaker? Ernest Chenault has been instrumental in helping me with my 90-day curriculum to financial literacy. And many of the sessions we have had, he has been there. All right. Anthony Johnson, can a collection agency collect on an account that they brought, but the original debt is over 7 years old? Okay. So again, it goes back to the statute of limitations. If you go back and look at your report, you know, a company will do something called a, oh goodness, I had the name of it. I'm looking right at it. Oh my goodness. A charge off, for example, 180 days after a bill is due. So let me start off with that first, Anthony, so that you can have a little bit of the chronology on how these collection agencies get involved. So let's say that you got a Comcast bill and it's 30 days overdue. Then it turns to 60. Then it turns to 90. Comcast is about to start putting paperwork together to determine if they need to go ahead and charge off your debt, because they're still paying taxes on your account receivable, for example. So then day 120 comes around, you don't pay. Day 150 comes around, you didn't pay. When it gets to day 180, they're about to get you off of their ledger, because they're not trying to pay taxes on you anymore. So what they're doing is they're going to write you off as a charge off, as a write off on their taxes. ABC Collection Agency is good at taking debt and bundling it up and paying 8 cents on the dollar on average for the purposes of getting all of these files. So they may call and say, hey, we're ABC Collection Agency on behalf of Comcast. Now, we don't know if they got a legal contract with Comcast or anything like that. We don't know all of that. But as far as your question is concerned, if you go back and look at that day 180, a collection agency could sell your debt off to another collection agency and all of that. But as far as the original debt, I tell people with late payments and everything else, you go back to the date of last payment as far as the 7 years is concerned. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion are not allowed to re-age your debt and start the clock over. However, if you make any type of arrangement and you start the statute of limitations over yourself, then the answer to your question could be yes. If you call ABC and you owe $1,000 and you make a payment arrangement with them, they can start it over. But they cannot do that unless you initiate it. All right. What's the next step in my credit score getting better? How often can I get my food? How often? Okay. All right. So here are the questions. All right. Next step in getting your credit score being better. All right. Remember the 80% of the game. Pay your bills on time. You have your credit card balances down to 10% or less, and get credit age. That's 80% of the game. Too many people focus on the negatives that are on their report, and they forget about what actually gets you the points. So I would say follow the 80% rule that I've taught you today, and separately work on those negative items. Let's say that you got an item that has like 1 30-day late. You could dispute that item saying that you weren't late on that, or you could ask for them to do an act of goodwill and say, well, out of these 5 years, I was only late once. I'm trying to get my credit right. Can you basically let me off the hook on this? Now, I've seen people be successful with that, but I don't think you'll be successful if you got like 5 30-day lates in a row. That I wouldn't recommend you even trying to do anything with that. All right. Let's see what the next one is. Not credit, but do you have to ensure setting up a budget for paying off credit cards that's more than just paying the minimum? All right. So, yes, what I would do is if you got Credit Karma, this is going to actually help out best. When you go to Credit Karma, you click on the credit utilization. You will see all of your revolving credit, how much you owe in contrast to what your limit is. You could either go high to low or low to high. And what I mean is this. If you want to go from low to high, start with the low-hanging fruit that you can pay off first. But I know some people who like trying to bite the whole apple by looking at the items that are the highest. Let's say that you owe 50%. What I would do is I would come up with a budget on how much can I pay off to get to the 10%. If you're trying to do it in 6 months, you could do your math. If you're trying to do it in 12 months, do your math. But you want to make sure that it's realistic as well, what you want to do. There's a couple of people that I know that didn't even know about that 30% rule, to where they're like, wait a minute, if I just pay them all off, my score go up. I'm like, yeah, exactly. I've seen somebody who has gone from a 599 to a 701 because he had the money and he just paid everything off. And I was like, yeah, now you got your points back on here. And all he had was late payments. He didn't have any collections or anything else. He was just hurting in the 30% category because he maxed out all his cards, not knowing that utilization is 30% of the score. So paying the minimum, just remember you're going to be paying a whole lot of interest as well. All right, let's see. How can I get a pre-qualified letter from a lender when looking for a new car so my credit won't be hard increased several times by the dealership? That's where that relationship with your bank or your credit union comes in for the purposes of making sure that they are able to look at your credit at that time. And that letter should be good for a determined period of time so that you won't have to go through all of that. The last thing I would want somebody to do with mediocre credit is to go to the car dealership and they pull your credit all over the US and you got 20 new inquiries. And when you try to apply for something else, those inquiries are on for 24 months. All right. As far as your banking relationship, I don't know who you bank with. I would start building that relationship. And with the tools that you got today, think about if you were the banker and think about if somebody else had your credit reports and scores. I always tell people, think about if you're the banker. They want to see particular items. And it's good to have that relationship too. I tell people at the Manhood University in Wiles, be that person to where if you don't have the relationship at that particular time, try to get a small loan or a secure card. Build that relationship at the beginning. You can be like, hey, I'm Mr. Jones. I like to go ahead and get a secure card or a secure loan. I want to go ahead and build my credit. So what can I do, et cetera, et cetera. Then 9 to 12 months may go by. Hey, remember me? I'm Mr. Jones. I'm the one that's paying the bills on time. I'm following the 80% rule that Dr. Ford taught me. And they're like, oh, yeah, we remember you. Let me look at your file. Oh, you're doing so great. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for paying your bills on time and keeping the balances low. You'd like to get another loan? Okay. Then another year goes by. Look, you don't have to go in and say, hey, my name is Mr. Jones anymore. You probably will have people that will greet you when you walk in. Hey, Mr. Jones, how you doing? Good to see you. Oh, you coming to see me? Okay, let me get you some water. Let me get you some coffee. How's the family? What can I do for you today? That's how you start that banking relationship. It all takes steps to get there, but we can all get there. What other questions do we have? We have about 5 minutes left, so I'll take 1 or 2 more questions before I talk about some of our other classes that we are having this this week and next week. If somebody's got 1 more question, I will entertain it. Even if it's earnest. All right. All right. Can you change the statement date on your credit cards? Yes. All you have to do is just call them and ask them to change the date for you. So yes, you can do that. And just make sure that when you have your dates, let's go back and talk about what we mentioned before. You got your due date, but you got your end date for your statement. The end date for your statement is when they will close out that statement and report what you owe at that time. And remember, my little rule is wait about 5 days until after your bill is due, because most of the time that's when the statement period starts over, and whatever balance you have at that time is what they're going to report. All right, our last question: which is better to conduct business with, credit unions? Let's see, which is better to conduct business with, credit unions or banks? Historically, credit unions give better rates. There are some good banks out there too. I have relationships with both. I do have a relationship with several of the banks around here and credit unions. So it's all about getting that relationship at the end of the day, because you could have a better relationship with a bank than you would with a credit union, and vice versa. But as far as rates and whatnot are concerned, historically, credit unions have better rates. Okay. Well, let me give you some more information. So if you go to the Memphis Public Library, and let me do this. I'm going to stop sharing real quick to try to show. I don't know if I can show it or not. Can y'all still hear me? If you can, type number 1 in the chat, because I think I just took something down. If you can still hear me, type number 1 in the chat for me. Okay, good. All right, so if you go on the website, if you go to memphislibrary.org, and you scroll down to where it says 901 Personal Finance, we have a few more classes this week and next week. So if you want to hear some more good stuff, on Thursday, the 22nd, we have Investing in the Stock Market and Creating Generational Wealth. The presenter will be yours truly again. I tell folks, you do not have to have $1 million to invest in the stock market. There's a gentleman named Boyce Watkins who taught me how to invest in the stock market. And I want to make sure that people know about some of these apps and whatnot that you can use, where you can invest with as much as $5 a day. And I'm also going to show you what exponentially can happen if you invest over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So I'm definitely hoping that you will be part of that conversation. On the 23rd, we will talk about purchasing your first home through the NACA program. If you're not familiar with the NACA program, you can go to naca.com, and it will give you information about the NACA program. And what you will see on that website is a program that specializes in home ownership. And it is a program where you do not have to have a down payment, no closing costs, no PMI, no points, no fees. And it is always going to be below market rate. Today's rates on a 30-year loan is 2.625%. And on a 15-year fixed loan, 2%. What bank is going to give you that? All right. And then our other items for next week. Next Tuesday, Miss Laquita Jones will be our guest for becoming an extreme couponer. As you know, prices of food and other things have gone back up, but she's a specialist in showing how to get those prices back down. We will have Mr. Bobby Peters discussing maximizing your retirement money in the workplace. And then we will have people from New York Life Insurance Company discuss on April the 30th the importance of life insurance, wills, and estates. So we're going to have a robust list of items for our financial literacy month. And let me do this. I would like to thank my team that has been with us. And I don't know specifically who is on here. And if I miss anybody, Ernest, I know you'll let me know so I will not get in trouble. So let me find out who's on here real quick. Mr. Ernest Chenault, I'd like to thank him. I know Miss Wong. Oh my goodness. Did I lose everybody? I hope I didn't.
Nope.
Wang Ying, are you
Which
here?
she stepped off.
She stepped off. How about Miss Sue Schnitzer? Is she on?
I I'm not sure.
I lost my whole list of people. So anybody that's
Okay.
part of the team where we were able to get every each one of these items on for Financial Literacy Month, I do appreciate you. And Ernest, do you have anything before I close us out? Because it's exactly 3:00 p.m.
Thank you for everything. You did a great job as usual, and I hope people really will take advantage of the information. Also, please feel free to go by the branches. There's information also inside the branches on credit, on savings, on debt, on bill payments. There's a lot of information at your local library. Please go by your local library and look at the displays that are up for this month. This is free information from the U.S. government that you can check out too, but there are also free books. So please go by your local library and make sure you pick up some information if you need something. Don't just pick up something for you, pick up something for someone else because you know somebody else who's in the same rowboat that you are and they need this information just as much as you do. So don't pick up one book, pick up two. Thank you very much, Dr. Ford.
And I hope I see more of you on the calls or in the sessions. Also, make sure on the website you can apply for, well, there's a drawing for a $25 Kroger gift card. So make sure that you do that as well. And when will those drawings be, Ernest?
The drawing will be on the 30th, on
Okay.
April 30th.
All right. Good, good. Will it be after our April 30th session,
And
or do you know that yet?
yes.
Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please let other people know about what's going on. Share this knowledge with your family, with your friends, with your associates. Because at the end of the day, I love what I do when I wake up in the morning and I know that I'm working with people across the city concerning financial literacy. I just tell folks I'm just teaching the things that some folks have learned and have used for decades and generations. And I just want to make sure that those who were not given that skill set were given part of that skill set today. So with that being said, thank you again for being here. And we appreciate you. And hopefully we'll see you on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Thank you again for those that have attended.